Here on The Colour of Country Life, we're speaking with Associate Professor David Hastie from Alphacrucis University College. How are you, David?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you with us, and we've been attracted to something not just yourselves, but the Christian Higher Education Alliance has been talking about its involvement in regional areas and trying to address the teacher shortages. Just broadly, I guess what's your view on the situation at the moment when we have these shortages of teachers across the nation?
Well, the shortages of teachers across the nation is a great problem, but in the regions it's a catastrophic problem because they're unable to staff schools at all levels of teaching across all subject areas. So you get these key gaps. And where there's a key gap in a school, particularly if you've got prolonged staff churn, staff coming and going all the time, it's very hard to establish a learning culture in the school. And so you get all of the comorbidities, if you like. You get lack of attendance and lack of attention, and kids get left behind. All of the systems that have been put in place to address this shortage have failed. And so governments and organisations like Alphacrucis University College have been working hard to come up with completely different models to address the shortages.
Now, it came to our attention you're also doing some great work in regional New South Wales. Explain to us how these new school hubs you're developing might help address that shortage in the medium to long term, if not the short term.
Well, the solution to retaining teachers in the regions is to train from the regions for the regions in the regions. We call it training on country for country. You really need people to become teachers who are committed to stay in the area. So they might be married to the area, or they might have a deep attachment to that area because of their family. These people are not going to leave. The problem is that they have to leave to train because the universities don't have campuses in regional areas, obviously, particularly in far-flung places. And so what we've done is designed a model where a group of schools gets together and they decide with agency to select a cohort of around about 10 students per year to go into teacher training. Now, at that minimum viable numbers, and with the schools backing, paying half their tertiary fees and employing them 1 day a week as a teacher's aide from day one of their training, the students don't need to leave to train, and the university college can actually flip the campus into the regions. And so those schools become a kind of a mini university campus, and the lecturers can go to the regions because it's been costed and the business model works. And so once you've got a cohort of 10, and then the next year a cohort of 10, and the next year a cohort of 10, you wind up getting 30 to 40 students in a pipeline across a network of schools of, say, about 5 to 10 schools. And these people don't want to leave because they're committed to the area, and they start to become enfolded into the family of the school. They become staff members, and these schools, which were operating in isolation before, become teaching schools like teaching hospitals. Now, the model's working very well in the New South Wales Hunter. We've been running it for 5 years up there, and they have 46 students in training, and they've graduated 9. We've launched it this year in the Diocese of Wilcannia-Forbes, Catholic Diocese of Wilcannia-Forbes, which is the very big regional and remote diocese that stretches out to Broken Hill and up to Brewarryn and Burke, places like that. Next year we're launching with the New South Wales Department of Education and in partnership with the University of New South Wales in the New South Wales Riverina with a group of 6 schools. So we're very excited to see whether the model's going to translate into the state education system.
Well, that's fantastic news in the local area, especially where there's been particular population growth and shortages of teachers in that Riverina, Wagga Wagga, southern New South Wales area. Just we spoke recently with Peter McEwen from the Christian Higher Education Alliance about how these your institution and others have been in the top 14 of the nation's highest quality universities. What is the case for studying at a faith-based institution?
Well, the faith-based institution has a particular unified narrative. One of the issues when studying teaching in the traditional way through the large state universities is that you can come out with a very fragmented idea of what it means to teach because, these large institutions have been going for a long time and not particularly agile. It's not the fault of the academics. There's some wonderful people in those, some great colleagues of mine, but the system itself is geared so that it's quite unwieldy and takes a long time to turn around and to be innovative. the smaller Christian higher education providers do have this unified narrative of what it means to teach and a vision for the good life, I guess. But they also, because of their size and because they are operating very much in a market, many of them without high degrees of government funding, they need to be innovative to survive. So as a education dean and now as a deputy vice president, we never sat in our offices just expecting enrolments to arrive, whereas in the large universities, it's not the business of the education deans or education lecturers to think about where the enrolments are coming from. They just expect them to turn up. Whereas we need to factor in every single enrolment, and we need to make sure that we're out, attracting enrolments out there in the market. Because we are smaller and we don't have the great reputations, the big established reputations of the large universities, we have to have a value proposition that's attached to quality. So in a sense, the structure of what's going on in Christian higher education means that we are inevitably a bit more innovative, a bit more agile, and I guess a bit more oriented around a unified concept of what it means to live the good life.
Yeah, and when you mention that good life, we know it very well in country areas, but is there an attractiveness too for Alphacrucis and your colleagues in other Christian higher education institutions for, I guess, young people that are coming, or even people of all ages coming from a faith-based background in their local communities?
One of the interesting things about Australia is that even though there's declining church attendance, there's an absolutely burgeoning enrolment in Christian faith-affiliated schools. So, for example, in the eastern states, there's a 40% secondary school enrolments in Christian-affiliated non-government schools, 40%. When you come to the major capital cities and the senior secondary, it's up near 50%. Now, that's a narrative that nobody's expected. And what it's doing is it's creating a demographic of schools that need an ethos-aligned pipeline of staff that are going to work well, say, in the Catholic education system or the independent Christian system or the church schools. But it's also producing graduates who are coming out with a particular orientation and are looking for a faith-based option when it comes to training as teachers, but also training in the social sciences and in business. Theology and ministry are core to all of these Christian higher education providers, obviously, but that's a fairly stable population. It's not a big growth area in enrolments, but the professional degrees such as psychology and counselling, chaplaincy, teaching, business, allied health, these are affiliated very much with the allied arms of the church. 70% of NGOs in this country are affiliated with churches. And so there is this natural base that's been under-resourced in terms of university options. So the strength of the Christian higher education provider sector is that it can actually address these needs amongst these particular institutions. The trick is to get the message out and to form partnerships like the teaching school hubs, but also around things like allied health for aged care, etc., or nursing for hospitals, where the hospitals themselves are saying we need a particular type of graduate coming through and we want to train them in the workplace rather than have them go off to university 4 years and then pop out the other end insufficiently trained in practical ways. And so I think there's a very much an unspoken thing going on in the Australian social contract. Our secularism is a form of Christian secularism, which sounds a bit odd, but it comes out of a conventional tradition of the English liberalism, which is very much a product or a child of English and British Christianity, if you like. It's very different to American and French secularism, which is based on this list of rules, in their constitutions. And so we have very much a secular country that has a deeply spiritual undertone. We're not a hard secular country. There's a lot of people who don't want to recognise that, and there's a shrillness about that. But the Australian population knows what it believes and knows what it wants.
Yep.
And you've got all these people sending their children to faith-based schools who aren't particularly religious themselves. So there's a yearning, if you like, and I think that's what the faith-based higher education sector is tapping into.
Absolutely, and we're certainly not afraid to share that sort of heritage, the Christian heritage, even our own constitution, humbly relying upon Almighty God is where it starts for us sometimes. Associate Professor David Hasey, thanks for joining us today. Your website, ac.edu.au. I notice you've got a summer intake coming up in November as well.
Absolutely, summer intake. Hop on the website, talk to our student services. We're very, very friendly and happy to help. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.